You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we hear a lot of predictions about what will happen to Trump, but this one really was the most stunning. Trump's own White House lawyers come out and predicted conviction and prison time for the former president. How much weight are you giving this prediction?
Given the source, Brian, Ty Cobb, former White House lawyer for Donald Trump, he's a serious lawyer. He's an accomplished lawyer. He is really unlike the current batch of Trump lawyers and lackeys, the Joey Takapinas and the Tim Parlatores and the Evan Corcorans. Ty Cobb is a serious, experienced, and accomplished lawyer. And when he goes on record as saying, based on what he has seen reported, I guess what he otherwise knows, not that he necessarily has any inside information about the Mar-a-Lago documents crimes, but when he says it is his firm belief that Donald Trump will be convicted and imprisoned, I think that is a serious opinion from a serious source, and I, for one, take it seriously.
Well, all of this seems pretty subjective in terms of who goes to prison for what. So I got to ask, if another person did what Trump did as far as the stolen classified documents and refusing to return them is concerned, would they go to prison? And is there even precedent for such a thing?
Yeah, really, the precedent that's being set is that Donald Trump has mishandled classified documents in the most egregious and unlawful way, and he has not been charged, has not been indicted, convicted, and imprisoned. That's what's unprecedented. History is replete with instances of people mishandling classified information, promptly being arrested, indicted, and often pleading guilty and then being sent to prison. There was a woman in Hawaii who was a former DOD employee who recently mishandled a couple of classified documents. The classification level was secret, well below the top secret and SCI documents that Donald Trump stole from the White House and unlawfully retained at Mar-a-Lago. And Miss Lara Vello is her last name. She was promptly arrested, indicted, pleaded guilty, and went to prison. I believe she's already completed her prison term. History is replete with examples like that. The unprecedented thing is that Donald Trump has not been held accountable.
Well, what happens here if Trump were to go to prison during the campaign? Could he still run?
Yeah, there is no legal prohibition, unfortunately, against running for office, even though you're under federal indictment, even if you have been convicted pending sentencing, and even if you were sentenced to a period of incarceration. Nothing in the law, nothing in the Constitution says you can't still run for president. Indeed, you could hold office. You could be elected from a jail cell. Now, practically speaking and politically speaking, I'd be surprised if, Donald Trump could actually get himself elected. But unfortunately, there's no legal prohibition.
Well, just to game this out for a moment, I'll preface this with a God forbid, but what if Trump did get elected and then did get convicted? Could he pardon himself? Could his own DOJ move to overturn the conviction?
Yeah, I'm going to join your God forbid on that one, but unfortunately, it's an excellent question. First of all, a presidential self-pardon has never been tested in the courts. There's nothing in the Constitution that says a president can or cannot self-pardon. There's nothing in any appellate case law or Supreme Court precedent that says a president can or cannot self-pardon. But I think most serious legal scholars and constitutional scholars have sort of landed on the belief that a president cannot lawfully and constitutionally issue himself a pardon. Why is that? Think about it. Donald Trump could steal all the money in the U.S. Treasury and then pardon himself for the theft, and the courts would be forced to uphold the legality and the constitutionality of such a pardon? I don't think so. Here's another example. The Supreme Court, as presently constituted, I don't have a lot of confidence in many of the decisions they're handing down. However, if the Supreme Court were asked the question, can a president self-pardon? Is it constitutional? Is it enforceable in a court of law? Think about this. let's assume that the president ordered the confinement of the Supreme Court justices because he aspires to be a dictator. And there's one thing a dictator has no use for. It's a Supreme Court that gets the last word, right? So he orders all Supreme Court justices detained unlawfully. And then he self-pardons for the kidnapping of those Supreme Court justices. Let's play this out. Those very Supreme Court justices would then be asked to rule on whether that presidential self-pardon was lawful or not. Listen, the one thing I do have a good deal of confidence in, it is the self-interest of the Supreme Court in not wanting to be relegated to a second-class branch of government. That's yet another reason. These are all sort of, thought experiments, but with Donald Trump, we are forced to engage in them. I don't think there's any way a Supreme Court would rule that a presidential self-pardon is lawful and constitutional.
Okay, and just to game this out for one more moment here, if Trump did become president, and it is the DOJ right now that's prosecuting this classified documents case, would his own DOJ, if he were to take over, then be able to basically remove themselves from the case that they're currently prosecuting?
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me that nightmare tonight, Brian. Here is the reality. Let's assume Donald Trump is pending a trial because he's been indicted in federal court. He then gets elected. He appoints another nefarious attorney general who then swoops in and orders that the pending prosecution against Donald Trump be dismissed. Listen, in recent history, we have an example of something similar to that because Mike Flynn, one of Donald Trump's criminal associates, pleaded guilty not once but twice to federal felonies. And what happened? Bill Barr's Department of Justice swooped in and arranged for that case to be dismissed. I mean, that is a horrific example of the weaponization and corruption of the Department of Justice. But it can be done. It has been done. Another similar example is Roger Stone. Prosecutors from my former office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, successfully prosecuted Roger Stone. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison. And 3 days before he was to report to the Bureau of Prisons to begin serving that sentence, Donald Trump swooped in, commuted his sentence, and then ultimately fully pardoned him, doing another favor for another criminal associate. So your question is an excellent one. Could a future Department of Justice that was headed up by somebody, President Trump, if he gets reelected, appointed to do his dirty work, could they swoop in and dismiss a criminal case against Donald Trump? Sadly, they could.
Okay. Now, reading the tea leaves here, do you anticipate another indictment soon for Trump, or do you think that we'll get to the Manhattan DA's case before we get any news from DOJ or Fulton County?
Yeah, Brian, you've heard me say before, I am not a high roller. I'm not a betting man. $1 is my betting limit. I would bet $1. We're going to see Jack Smith return one or more federal indictments against Donald Trump before Donald Trump's New York case makes it to trial. New York has sort of a unique procedure by which they allow the litigation of lots and lots and lots of issues before the case ever gets to trial. That ends up pushing New York trial dates well off into the future. I have a feeling we're going to see at least one federal indictment, probably Georgia as well, but at least one federal indictment sometime either this summer or perhaps this fall before Donald Trump's New York prosecution ever makes it to trial.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot to look forward to. Glenn, I want to finish with this just to show everybody watching what a trooper Glenn is right now. He is doing this from vacation. Glenn, where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Greece, the birthplace of democracy. I'll tell you, I have been inspired by sort of visiting the ruins, the ancient agora. And when I saw some of this recent reporting about some very serious lawyers who were on Donald Trump's team and Donald Trump's side not too long ago, guys like Ty Cobb, saying he believes Donald Trump will be convicted and imprisoned, even though I'm on vacation, it was time to jump on and do a legal breakdown video.
That's right. Well, we appreciate the commitment to keeping everybody informed here. So for those watching, if you want to stay on top of this stuff, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching the Legal Breakdown.